Taylor killed and U.S. border not sealed. I am, as always, your host,
Taylor
Christopher Paul Legdell,
killed
MEDMA.
and U.S.
We
border
are
not
Duncanville
sealed.
High School in
I
these
am, as
United
always,
States,
your host,
and
Christopher
today is
Paul
November
Legdell, MEDMA.
17th,
We are
2020.
Duncanville High School
And on
in
this
these
date in
United
history, in
States, and today is
1558,
November 17th,
Queen Elizabeth
2020.
became
And on this date in
the
history,
Queen
in
of England. This was after her sister Mary had
1558,
died,
Queen
and this is a way of
Elizabeth
legitimizing
became
her.
the
If you're
the
wondering about
Queen
my
of
hat,
England.
it's a
This was
traditional
after
hat
her
in
sister Mary had
Kyrgyzstan.
died,
It's great for
and
a
this is
day
a way
out
of
on the town
legitimizing her.
whenever you don't
If you're
want
wondering
anyone to
about my
see you.
hat, it's
So,
a traditional
I know that I
hat
can
in
walk down the street to
Kyrgyzstan.
this and no one
It's
gives me
great
a
for a
second
day
look.
out on the
So,
town
everyone have a
whenever
great
you don't
day.
want anyone to see you. So, I know that I can walk down the street to this and no one gives me a second look. So, everyone have a great day.
Welcome to yet another day of fun as we talk about David Wilmot. David Wilmot, owner of a large mole underneath his right eye, and looks like 1.5 eyebrows. Kind of an odd selection for David. He tried to propose a bill called the Wilmot Proviso that said that slavery would never exist in the Mexican Cession. Unfortunately, it never passed. This was a time of a lot of controversy, and things were going crazy in Congress following the end of the Mexican War, which we finished talking about last time on the last episode of Dual Credit U.S. History. So, moving on from that, there comes an election, and as I told you before, James Knox Polk only ran once. So, you had to make some changes there. And you've got 3 candidates. Okay? Starting off with Lewis Cass. And Lewis Cass is trying to come up with some type of idea to hold together the United States and give him a chance at the presidency. So Lewis Cass's idea was the idea of popular sovereignty. And this would let the citizens of each state decide whether or not they would have slavery. Okay? And by the way, whenever we talk about the citizens, we are not talking about the slaves. So this does not count the slaves, who I believe would overwhelmingly have supported anti-slavery legislation. And he's going to lose a majority of his support from abolitionists because this would make it possible for slavery to spread to other regions. Now, the next one is what's called the Free Soil Party. Now, the Free Soil Party, sounds pretty good. They are anti-slavery, but it had nothing to do with the slaves. It had more to do with the fact that having slavery is going to hurt the poor farmers. So the idea is you don't want to hurt poor farmers. And the way to do that is by, not allowing slavery there. So it was a way of trying to level the playing field for all the poor farmers. Okay? The very fact that Van Buren wins, though, it's going to cause a separation in Democratic votes, and it's going to make it possible for the Whig candidate of Zachary Taylor to win. Okay. By the way, the Whig Party also is going to want to have free homesteads for everyone. So let's look at the winner now. Oh, and by the way, I need to point this out. If you look on the bottom left-hand side, you see Lewis Cass. And Lewis Cass has his hand in his shirt. And the reason for that is an homage to Napoleon. That's how Napoleon posed in a picture. And as a result of this, if you were a studied man of the military, you would quite often pose with your hand in your shirt like this. This doesn't mean anything else other than the fact that you're a military man. So pay attention in future elections, because that will be something that I will probably bring back up. Now, Zachary Taylor, okay, we talked about him as being the victor or champion of the Battle of Buena Vista, but in truth, he has, he is famous for not following orders. Once he takes office, he threatens to hang everyone who has any problem with the fact that they're going to add California to the Union as a free state. Eventually, he is going to die as a result of having a bowl of cherries on the 4th of July, and he dies from eating a bowl of cherries. Uh, he will, whenever he dies, his death will lead to the Compromise of 1850 passing by what is considered to be a pretty weak president. Now, is he the worst president? No, we've got a lot worse presidents than that out there. So don't think that either one of these are the worst. And it would have been interesting to see what he does from here. In fact, he scared the crap out of James K. Polk whenever he said, you know what, we should just set up the whole Mexican cession as a foreign nation, which, James K. Polk is like, you know how many Americans died, for this, or how many Americans got diarrhea for this? We are not going to just give this land up without a fight. Now, John Sutter, okay, he buys some land from a guy who is in complete and total poverty, and he goes out to the river to get something to drink. And while he was there, he looked out and he saw gold in the river. When people heard how easy it was to get gold, there was an explosion of the population. Okay, if you've ever wondered why the San Francisco football team is called the 49ers, it has to do with the fact that there was a California gold rush, and it was just outside of town, or just outside of San Francisco, about 75 to 100 miles. So as soon as people found that he just found gold in California, this causes a large explosion in the population. It's the greatest mass migration in U.S. history. The truth is, most miners don't make any money. They're swindled out of the majority of that either by their by people that tell them that they have fool's gold instead of actual gold, and many of them lose the money also in brothels. So anyone who's thinking that they got really wealthy, well, you're going to have to think again, because this does not work out very well for them. Okay? Now, as soon as you would hear that someone found gold, you would see the creation of a boom town. Okay? A boom town is a mining town that formed quickly overnight. Okay? So people would explode in, they would build the city, and they would start making money, hands over fist in a short period of time. Now, the problem was, as soon as the gold started to dry up in that region and they moved into another area, then everyone evacuated. Some of them largely intact, some of them would leave beds, some of them would leave other supplies in the city, and whenever they did, people drive through, think they would come upon a town, and they'd find it evacuated. Now, with these cities popping up, there was no real law or anyone to control these cities, so what happens is there's vigilance committees, and these are people that patrol the streets and punish wrongdoers. So you could see a lot of people, killed on the street, just shot or hung in many cases. Now, one of the most influential people of the time was a woman by the name of Harriet Beecher Stowe, and she writes a book that's called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, and this is in response to the fugitive slave law that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. Okay, this is a very controversial book. It's actually not based on any truth. It was based on stories that she had heard, but she writes such a riveting novel that it's extremely influential on really getting people to take a stance against slavery. Okay, so she writes a lot of this off of little stories that she hears, and I don't know. Well, let me talk about Beecher Bibles too, where people would be smuggling these books into the South. Eventually, they're going to try and ban the book completely in the South, but the whole idea of Beecher Bibles in the South was also getting guns down to people that were anti-slavery. So, anyway, so Uncle Tom's Cabin, in brief, we have, I'm going to refer to them as Family One. And Family One, what they do is they have Tom They love Tom. He's a member of the family. He teaches the kids how to read, and he takes care of them during the day. And they call him Uncle Tom, so he's considered part of the family. They love Uncle Tom. They don't want anything bad to ever happen to him. The problem was Dad was a moron and a gambler, and he is going to have a large amount of debts, and as a result of that, the debt collectors are going to require Tom for payment. The sons of the gambler from family one are really upset, and Tom goes to another family. So whenever he gets to the second family, the man there loves Tom, thinks Tom is great, and tells Tom, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and free you, and I'm going to take care of this, and I'll do all the paperwork in the morning. And so, Tom's pretty happy. He's pretty happy, and he sits down and he has a heart attack. Well, whenever he dies, his sister decides that he is going to, or she is going to sell Tom because she didn't feel like he had anything in writing, and I guess in reality he didn't. So Tom is once again sold, except this is where the story really takes, even a worse turn, and he's sold to a horrible man, and they take Tom, and Tom is brought to his new master. This is family number 3, and they ask him what his skills are, and he says, well, I taught my family how to read or write, and he gets slapped around for lying because, a black person can't read, especially during that time. If you were caught teaching a black person how to read, you could be executed. Anyway, so Tom goes out to pick cotton the next day, and he picks, about twice as much as what everyone was expected to pick. And going back to the house, he sees a girl crying, and he asks what happened. She didn't pick enough, so he gives her some of his. And when they get back, he's beaten for trying to deceive the master. Okay, so that causes the woman that he helped to get upset, and she decides she's going to try and run away. So when they can't find her the next day, they think the only person that knows is Tom. So they beat Tom to the point where he is dying from his beatings that he's been taking. And so, by the way, sorry for the long slide here. So they beat him for the hiding her. Meanwhile, the first family had found a way of saving enough money to buy Tom back. They come, they buy him back even though he's dying, and they take him home with them, but he dies before he gets there. It's something that really helps get people against slavery. Okay? On a kind of similar note, and just a book that made a little bit of difference. By the way, one other thing. When Abraham Lincoln meets Harriet Beecher Stowe, he says, "Finally, I have met the woman who started the Civil War." Her book has been translated into about 100 different languages, and as recently as 5 years ago, it was still being taught in the Ukraine. So, people, when they're learning about the United States, that's part of the picture that's painted by Russians. Hinton R. Helper writes a book called Impending Crisis at the South, and he shows non-slaving Southerners suffered because of slavery. So basically, the poor white people, they're really struggling because of all these rich white people that have slaves, and that they're the true victims of slavery. By the way, I wasn't saying this was a happy story. Now, by the way, sorry for anyone I just scared. This is Daniel Webster, and Daniel Webster gives the 7th of March speech. And in the 7th of March speech, he gets a compromise on the Mexican cession, And he said, you know what, you should just go ahead and allow as much slavery as you want to in the Mexican concession because it won't work. So instead of people fighting or civil war starting, let them take all these slaves that they want out to the desert, and all that's going to happen is it's going to fail because it won't work there. Okay? On a separate note, what a scary looking man. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and seeing his face. I told you that, Henry Clay was just ugly, but he's haunting. You could, put him across from your toilet, and it would take all the work out of going to the bathroom because it would scare the crap out of you every time you saw him. In fact, I might have to pause this just a minute to take care of myself right now because he's terrifying me. I see him sometimes whenever I try and sleep. He's a scary man. Moving forward. Okay, the Compromise of 1850. Okay, this is basically called a compromise, but this actually is a causes a lot of fights. Okay, so number one, it's going to admit California as a free state. Okay, so normally when they were adding states at this time, they would add one free and one slave at the same time to keep a balance, to keep slavery from being rolled out in the nation. Okay. So to balance that, number two, they said that the Mexican cession would have no restrictions on slavery. Now, if you look at this, the top of Texas is at 36 degrees 30 minutes, so that's supposed to be the line that cuts off slavery. So what this is going to do is undo part of the uneasy compromise between the North and South on slavery, this makes no one happy. But through popular sovereignty, again, it's not going to make sense to have slavery in the Mexican cession. So that's the orange areas over there, like the really orange areas, not the yellowish orange, but the orangish orange, Utah Territory and the New Mexico Territory. Number three, the slave trade was abolished in the District of Columbia, but not slavery. So you could not buy new slaves. And number four, one of the most controversial and stupid things I've ever heard is the Fugitive Slave Act, and it has two parts. One, a sworn statement could send any black person into slavery in the South. So if your neighbor is annoying you, and you want to really be a jerk, you can sell them into slavery. Okay? All you do is go and say, I swear they're a slave, and guess what? Slavery. The second part is if you did not try and capture a fugitive slave, you could go to jail and it couldn't be challenged in court. So, if you're a short person, like my mother who's about 4'11", and you're walking around and there's a slave, say the size of Shaquille O'Neal, who is basically mass-wise at least 3 of my mother's, she would be required by law to try and catch him, or she would be thrown in jail. So, anyway, it made it so that even if you were against slavery, you could still get in trouble for not enforcing this ridiculous act. Okay. So, a filibuster. This is a description of someone who leads some type of private army to take land from another country and cede it to the country where he comes from. Okay? So there were several different filibuster movements that were either planned or started where countries where people would pour from the United States into other lands to try and create their own nation. There were several attempts into the Mexican states of Sonora and Chihuahua, and actually I believe Coahuila was in one of those, and then also incursions into California to take Baja California. That's the southern strip of land just to the south of California. William Walker at one point tried to seize Baja California. When he came back to the United States after he failed, he was put on trial for what he did. The jury not only found him not guilty, but they demanded that Mexico pay damages for what happened to him during this trip, which, of course, the courts threw out. So William Walker, who, if you look at him in the picture, he was about 5'2" and 100 pounds, but whenever the shots started firing, he was extremely brave. Well, anyway, so William Walker then will go down to Nicaragua and try and take over Nicaragua, which he does. And he had a handshake deal with Franklin Pierce, who was the President of the United States at the time that he did it. And the idea was to make Nicaragua part of the United States. Now, the United States would want Nicaragua because that was really the best place to build a canal. Okay? I know the Panama Canal is built through Panama and that it seems to be a good piece of land, but the truth was there was a lot less of a problem in Nicaragua. They had a major river that flowed from the Caribbean to Lake Nicaragua, and so they would have to build a much smaller canal to get all the way through the country. On a very boring note to everyone, Lake Nicaragua is the only place in the world that has freshwater sharks. Okay, so anyone who was ever like in a lake and like, I'm afraid of sharks, you don't have to worry about it unless you're in Lake Nicaragua. So future vacation plans for some people. I'm tired of being attacked by saltwater sharks. Wouldn't it be nice to be attacked by freshwater sharks? Anyway. Okay, so let's get to a couple schemes that go with Cuba. And there were more than this, but these are really the two biggest things. So the South really wanted to add Cuba to the United States because it allowed slavery, and it would be easy to, continue to have slavery and protect slavery in the South if you added the nation of Cuba to the United States and even cut it in half, and you could add, more than one state to the United States and kind of keep the balance with slavery. So James K. Polk tried to buy it for $100 million. And there was one planned invasion that goes in and it completely fails and almost leads to a war with Cuba. After this fails, the people in the South were still not content with what happened, so they put together a secret meeting to buy Cuba for $120 million, which I might add that they did not have, or the U.S. would go to war with Spain to get Cuba. And the North finds out about this, and the plan is abandoned as a result of this, but this also kills a northern plot at the same time to add Canada to the United States. So at one point we were looking at both Cuba and Canada, but both of those failed. So that was the Austin Manifesto. So this leads us to the end of today. I hope everyone is having a great day. We just have 2 more days until we go to Thanksgiving break. So I hope everyone has a nice and safe trip, and I'll see you soon.